Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Redefining Work Presents the Riff. This is actually like the Riffito. It's the Riff minus our third Amiga, AJ Thomas, who is
That's right. Playing.
yeah, she's doing much cooler things than we are right now. She gets to be hanging out in Bordeaux, and we're nerding out on GPTs. But I'm here with my man Q Hamirani. Q, how are you, buddy?
Good, man. How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. What brings us here? What are we riffing on today?
I think the one thing that's top of mind is just lack of sleep. But maybe you can ask, maybe we can talk about why lack of sleep, because it's not the usual. I think last Friday, for me at least, Friday night took a whole different spin. Well, once you have a kid, it's a whole different spin to begin with. But once my son went to sleep, I think around 8:30, I was like, let me check out this new like GPT builder thing, because I heard about it in the week, but I didn't really get to see what it was about or really understand or digest it. And the rest of the weekend was just like obsessed, spending way too much time. My wife was not happy this weekend because every time my son was asleep or she had him, I was just like back to my computer. Not only that, I was doing it on my phone to the point where my brand new iPhone was freezing and I had to restart it.
I
So,
feel like they
anyways,
should, Tim
it's
Cook should be giving us a warning on that, right? If you go down a GPT rabbit hole, you may freeze up your new iPhone.
you may freeze up your new iPhone, or yeah, or you will not sleep and you will actually enjoy it. I mean, all said and done, I think it's been like over 20 years, or like the last time I can remember I had a feeling like this was probably when I like turned on the massive computer when I was in eighth grade and had those big floppy disks and was like amazed with what it could do. So it was definitely like definitely I don't know how to describe it, but a childhood memory, but also feeling like I have a new buddy. So definitely the rabbit hole was like me realizing like late into Friday night or through Saturday morning that I found a new friend, but I'm gonna drive myself crazy with just this one friend who I can keep changing to do what I want. And
Okay,
then
wait, hold on. I feel like we have to pump the brakes for a moment and hit the rewind button because we like jumped right in and started
that's
nerding out
true. That's
immediately
how
on
I am.
GPT.
You know how
But
I am.
yeah, I think for our audience who maybe is like, what the hell are they talking about? Maybe we have to hit the rewind button. We have to kind of go back in time and say, what was the big? Okay, I'll actually tee up the news, and
Yep.
then I'm going to turn it over to you to lay some context on it. So, unless you've been in an isolation chamber for the past year, you've heard of a company called OpenAI and their platform ChatGPT. Hopefully, you've had a chance to play around with ChatGPT a little bit over the last year since it was released in November of 2022. ChatGPT obviously is not groundbreaking or revolutionary, nor are generative AI chatbots. They've been around, and ChatGPT isn't the only one. What was revolutionary that was announced last week is OpenAI announced the release of GPTs, which enable ChatGPT Plus customers to basically create and code their own GPTs. When I say code, this can be conversational text to build this. You're not actually writing Python or any code, but you can program GPTs to do whatever you want. And so that's the foundation. Q, take it from here. Like, what is a GPT and why should people care?
Yeah, so I think the G, the new thing, as you mentioned, was the fact that you can customize it to what you want it to do. And what does that really mean? What do you want it to do? So there's a couple dimensions to that. One is what you hit on, which is it's a conversational tool. Like you're building a technology that can interact and provide you with information, but you're doing it by just talking to it via text. Like that is just mind blowing to me that I can tell a computer literally like I want something to do this, and they're like, how do you want them to behave? So I think there is the aspect of you can build something that's not only sourcing from a large volume of information that's available in a very quick way, but you can customize it. And when we say customize, you can upload your own documentation, things that you may be following, things that you may have done. You can tell the bot, be very upfront and direct when people ask, or be very warm, or ask the person what type of tone it is. So I think it just ends up being like, to my earlier point, now that I'm reflecting, it's like the hundred perfect or different friends that you wanted, you can just kind of like make it, and you can see how you react to it. So I think that was very unique in the sense where the ability, which I didn't see coming, to be honest, either, like AI or an umbrella, we understand there's a lot of use cases and there's a lot of things going on. We've used ChatGPT on and off, at least myself, over the last few months. But the fact that you can just build, and the part that was mind blowing is your imagination, at least for me. I just couldn't contain it because it was like, oh, I wanted to do this. Now, what if it could do that? Like any of your what ifs, you can almost try to solve for without knowing any like technology. You don't have to be a programmer. You don't have to code. We could be talking. I'm sure. I don't even know if this exists. Is there a way to just voice into Chat GPT? Like,
Yeah.
you can do a voice note or
Yeah, you
something
can do
like
voice.
that
You don't
for
know the
them.
type.
So we could be talking about it and it would spit out a bot and we could start like testing it. So I think the fact that you can just do it with no technical knowledge in a conversational medium and then personalize it to how you would respond or you would want them to respond to the recipient on the other end is just, it just feels like all of a sudden like we have power, or at least I felt very powerful. And I felt like I had 10 friends in one night. So clearly I have, separate issues which we'll keep for another day. But
I mean, that's a lot of serotonin right there, right? Like power, friendship.
yeah, some dopamine, like all, yeah.
Sam Altman's going to catch this. He's going to be like, "Oh, we need to tweak our marketing a little bit to get this." Look, I think, and I get everything you're saying. I think until you've actually used it and built a GPT and then interacted with that GPT, you might be listening to this and being like, I don't get it. Like once you've done that, it recalibrates everything. And like, I began thinking I want to like shift to use cases for a
Yeah,
minute because I think ChatGPT, the way for those of you that have used kind of, core ChatGPT since it came out, generally the best practices of using it is prompting, right? So you have to kind of prompt the chat in that particular conversation around what it's going to be doing and what you expect from it. So like, you are a world-class researcher who is known for creating amazing biographies on um, figures in business. I want you to create a biography on, the CEO that I'm going to have a meeting with, right? Like that's a practical example of a use case. But I think when you use it now, I started playing with it. So we both created a few over the weekend,
yeah,
and I'll kind of open with mine. Like I started by creating an event, Copilot basically for HR events. Like, and I wanted to program it with, all the events I
yeah, I
knew
love
of. Shout out to Hung Lee. He curates an amazing recruiting brain food big list of events. I fed it that.
it.
I
Nice.
fed it other kind of events that I'm familiar with. And then I gave it some logic around what to recommend and what to ask users. So, ask, in order to be a targeted recommendation for an event, you need to know like, what do you want to learn? What
Yep,
locations are you open to? What's your budget?
yep,
Right? All these kinds of things that will help it give a more targeted set of recommendations. And then I started playing around with queries and I was blown away with how spot on it was. So I said, okay, events are cool, but like what's more useful? And so I
yeah,
said, okay, let me actually build a GPT that HR leaders can use to like understand in their process and their HR kind of process stack where they can use automations and basically build GPTs to bring more efficiency to the work. So like the meta GPT,
yeah.
and then that works. So I was like, okay, this is more interesting. Like, let me create another one. Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
I'm saying you just keep peeling that onion and you just keep going into it.
Well, that's the thing is like you like you can do cool, fun things, but you can do super practical things. Like the third one was help HR leaders align their talent strategy with the business strategy, right? Because obviously we want to have that impact as business leaders, and we need that capability to do so. And so this is now a guided co-pilot, a guided chatbot that is programmed specifically to do that.
Yeah,
So and again, this is like literally hours on both of our ends
yeah,
tinkering, right? The possibilities are endless. But let's actually talk a little bit about the risks, right? Because I think you and I are both tech geeks and we get
yeah,
excited about stuff like this. But it's easy to get blinded by excitement and perhaps with that lose sight of the perhaps challenges or risks. So bring us back down to earth, man. Like what are the things that we should be kind of concerned about or at least mindful of as we're using this tech?
yeah. I think, one of the things that I think we need to really think through is when the imagination goes wild and you do get it to do a lot, you aren't possibly or potentially thinking of all the use cases that you can tell the bot don't react to this, right? Because you can tell the chat GPT like don't do this scenario, don't react to this, or go in a specific what to avoid. You can tell the GPT
Yeah.
that, but you have to really like think of everything that you can avoid, and that's almost hard to bound. So I think it's going to be really interesting, especially as we play more with these. I've tried for the ones I created, like I started like just typing profanity into one. One of my bots is like for you to like convert your raging thoughts of frustration into polite emails so you can send it to your boss or your peer so that you can actually turn it into productivity. And I've uploaded all these Zen scriptures which I follow. So it also has mindfulness. So it calms you down, saves your job, helps you improve productivity, and potentially saves HR burden down the line. But my
Please
point
tell me you
is that,
called that before you click send.
what's that?
Please tell me you called that GPT before you click send.
I used it probably 30
I
times right
mean,
before I even sent, and I tried all sorts of combinations. So I guess to your point, the risks are too in terms of how is the efficacy, how much can you contain the efficacy through guardrails through your own programming, because we're all learning. And then I think the second risk is as there's wide adoption through the community and through the workforce, is making sure that you're using it right. My thought process is still that this is not going to replace humans completely. There is a maybe the word I'm looking for is, I would say, instead of artificial intelligence, it's almost combined intelligence. So there will be a human centric aspect to the bot that you build. Either it's a sanity check or a gut check or an instinct before it does everything end to end. In some use cases, like automation, you don't even need the human mind. You're doing it because you need manpower. Those can be automated. So there's a little bit of, I think, where is that human in the loop that you want to have do some level of checks? So how, and then how do you build the right guardrail? So I don't know, to be honest. I think there are risks. That's a very valid point on calling out. And I think one of the things when I realized on Saturday that I wasn't the only one that was, in my own one room doing having fun, I realized the community is going to be so powerful in this, right? Like learning about even just people focused GPTs. That's kind of what I posted on LinkedIn. And I want to start a community of just everyone that's building great people GPTs, as I call it, PGPTs, and help us understand. I think it was you, if I remember right, at some point in my crazy week, telling me like you learned that you can actually warn, speaking of risks, you can actually tell your GPT not to share all your programming um, variables with other people if they ask for it, because it will just spit it out, right? Like
yeah,
I didn't even know, I didn't even think of that. Like that's an example of like a risk, whichever way you look at it, where you're building something and someone else is just asking for everything you build. And again, there's nothing, no, it's not necessarily wrong, but you have to be aware of it. So there's just, I think, the risks are still to be known. That is the risk itself, that we have to figure out the risks, I guess, is
yeah.
one way to
Yeah.
put it. But I'm just so excited about the community, and I'm more excited about just the people function. A lot of times, like you and me are fairly tech geeks. I was an engineer in college, and that's why I felt like this was like 25 years back. I used to build transformers in college. That was my specialty, electrical engineering. And here I am, the T and GPT is like full circle 24 years later, right? It's kind of crazy. But what I do want to do, and I think the reason why this riff is fun for us to do as well, is help people understand that this is actually really easy. Like get immersed in it, because until you get immersed in it, you can't really explain it really well. You can't digest it, and each one will figure out their own unique use case that I've probably not thought of or you've not thought of, and collectively, there we go. Like we have like a collection of use cases, and I don't know there's so much from my perspective, optimism for the future, recognizing the risks. Because I don't know, I can't remember if it was you. I know we've geeked out a lot about it. That's why I keep referencing. I don't know if it was you, but I was talking to someone about like, can we have our GPTs talk to each other and string it
Yeah.
into like, like an orchestrated GPTs. So anyways, I think there's a lot here. There's risks that we don't know, so we have to be cognizant of, and we just gotta, proceed with caution, but don't hold back out of fear.
Yeah. Look, maybe our next riff will be our GPTs talking to each other.
That,
Yeah, you never
I don't
know.
know. We
And
might
look,
we might get some crazy stuff.
I don't know if we want to air that.
Yeah.
I want to come back here with a community, but I want to just kind of stay with the theme of risks. We're
Yeah.
just a couple threads for viewers to think about. One, just from a legal perspective, right? This is moving so fast.
Yeah.
The laws, regulations, compliance, etc., is nowhere near where we are in terms of what we're building. And there's a whole series of issues which has already come out with some lawsuits around like intellectual property from artists and comedians and authors and what does it mean for content to be in the public domain and then scooped up and spit out as an original idea when it's not. And so because of the nature of LLMs trained on public data, it is all trained on public data. It did not generate any of those ideas. It did not generate any of that IP that it's been trained on. So I think that is something to consider. But again, we're not there yet, but I think we will be at some point. I wouldn't let that hold you back, but just be mindful that's coming. The other piece that I was kind of thinking about as you started to see just how quickly these GPTs were hitting the market is, you know, what you don't see, especially if you're not, savvy to like how these things are built, you don't see the guts, so to speak, right? Of like how a GPT was designed. And so you might see a GPT in a marketplace and you'll see the title of it, you'll see a little avatar, and you'll see a brief, like one sentence description. And you might say, hey, that sounds awesome. I need exactly that. And then you start using it, and the results kind of aren't maybe what you thought they would be, or maybe they're way off. And the challenge is, and I think this will kind of come back to your community piece, which will be a nice segue, is knowing that it was built from trusted domain experts. I think will also be important because I think I've got a newsletter that's coming out this week, and in it I talk about the importance for HR to kind of take the reins on this and actually have a direct role in shaping the future of how these are used in HR and recruiting. So it's the GPTs for HR by HR, programmed in a hopefully kind of open and transparent way so that we understand like how it's designed, what information and data sets it was trained on, and that will help shape the information. Because without that, look, and I'm sure this is happening right now. You've got people in a basement somewhere just cranking out GPT after GPT after GPT.
Yeah.
And some of them are going to sound great, right? Like you could go to ChatGPT and say, build a list of 100 GPTs that
Yeah.
HR would find desirable.
And it'll just,
And then go and just build those with no like logic of what it means to do performance reviews or to generate a global talent strategy or any of that. It doesn't matter. You're just going to feed in some basic stuff, put it out in the market. And then if you're not a savvy consumer,
yeah.
you may just see that and be like, hey, that seems like that would be valuable for me. Or at worst, when the market opens, pay money for that and realize that it's not actually additive and it's not helping you in the way. So I want to come back to you on the kind of your vision for the people GPT community that you're building and maybe how that might solve that. Because I know you've got a space for people who are interested in learning more. You've got a space for actual creators as well, where they can collaborate and share notes and share ideas. So let's kind of ride out on that story.
Yeah, the whole idea sparked from just like I hate having fun alone. In terms of I was sitting all night for 2 nights, like, and this again, ironically goes back to why I did not do engineering as a profession. I studied engineering, but I didn't enjoy sitting in a lab and building machines by myself. So I wanted to be around people. So it sparked from that. And then over the years, learned that the community in this regards can help each other think through and problem solve on things that may be technical in nature, but also things like ethics and how do we use like just our own riff, like the thoughts you've put out. Like I'm like, no, they make sense, but I didn't think of them right necessarily. Yeah. So the idea is the community. What I'm thinking is one is just to have a place where we can share and we can collectively riff, for lack of better words. And I'm thinking of it more in terms of builders and explorers. So builders, anyone who wants to build a GPT or learn how to build one and has questions, maybe we teach each other how we're doing, how we're connecting different pieces of content, what we're working on. And then explorers are more the idea that I want to share this with the people community, to your point, because we can really be at the forefront of this, not only for HR, but our role as business partners is helping the organizations understand how they will be using it in their functions and how that will impact their org structures, their productivity, the ways of working. So we have a dual role, right? Like we have a dual role internal to HR and then to the rest of the organization. And at least from my perspective, I think typically when these are more technology driven, HR tends to be at a lag because of the fact that it's not the comfort zone, right? For lack of
Yeah.
better words. And this is, a bit of a digress, but similar to the Airbnb Live and Work Anywhere program. When we created that program and figure out the intricacies and complexities, the whole reason I wanted to share it with the world and I would go to HR conferences talking about it was so that HR can understand, people leaders can understand that it's really not that complex. Here's how each of us have solved it. We can help each other, and we hold the keys. We hold the keys to how the rest of the organization can function. In this case, do it with ethics or figure it out together because it's moving so quick that just a week from today or even tomorrow we'll probably thinking through something else. So the idea is for folks to join the community, be a community that's driven by everyone as part of it, share knowledge, learn, and drive adoption of what we're doing, and collectively move the function or kind of share with the function what we're doing.
Yeah. And look, I can't remember if you shared this. So if you already did, we get to hear it twice. That's great. Where can people find this? If people want to join this community, how can they find it online?
So the easiest way to find it is it's on the website called the PGPT. So sorry, the PGPT, People GPT. So just go to thepgpt.com, or maybe you can put it in your newsletter because I'm sure a lot of folks will find it there too. Or just hit me up on LinkedIn and I will share it as well there once it's out. It's supposed to go live later this week. I just need to get a little bit more sleep and I'll get it done.
Well, you'll get there. And
Or
please tell
maybe,
me,
I don't know, can I get the GPT to just create the whole website for me and publish it? I don't know. I don't know if we're there yet.
I mean, I don't know how far away. I don't think we're there yet, but I mean that's the thing. I mean, actually, it's an interesting use case you talk about because one of the potentials of GPT is like we talk a lot about automation, and we're not there yet,
Yeah.
but we may be there soon because one of the things that GPTs in their roadmap will actually allow them to connect to third parties and do multi-stage actions. In which case, it could be like build a web. Like I don't. I mean, again, like that's the cool part about this is like no one knows where this is going to go. No one knows how this is going to evolve. But there's going to be some really cool shit.
Yeah.
And some terrifying shit also. I mean, I'll say like a funny use case that made me go through like a spectrum of emotion in the period of like 5 minutes. When I shared on LinkedIn when OpenAI announced this, and I was like, oh, this is going to be unbelievable for HR. There's going to be so many possibilities, blah, blah, blah. And, one of my LinkedIn connections went and built a Lars GPT, basically. A GPT that was kind of trained on me to give advice. And it was like, he called it like, I forget what it was. And at first I was like, hey, that's really cool. Then I was like, hey, that's really scary. And I was like, well, hey, that's probably more cool than scary. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. What, like, my mind started going all these directions. I'm like, well, what if somebody was like malicious and they created like one to be a complete asshole and said like it was you, and it was like you're engaging, you're like, hey, cool, I get to learn from Q. I'm gonna get a Q-tip. And it's like, piss off, you suck, you should leave the field. And you're like, wait a minute, Q, what have you done to me? So that's the thing is like,
sorry, go
ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's ironic, and obviously my mind's all over the places, and as you can tell, but it's ironic when you think about it. A year ago, the world was all about Web3 and blockchain, which still exists. I'm not saying it's not, but the whole idea there was
NFTs.
Yeah, and NFTs. Yeah. But the whole blockchain Web3, which I was deep into that rabbit hole at one point too, was the fact that everything is transparently there. You can't see a transaction that's not happened on the blockchain. You bring it out here, and I'm thinking out loud here, but it's almost the inverse. Like you can't see the nuts and bolts to what you just said, but you can see the output. So it's kind of weird, the contrast. That's all I wanted to call out. From like you could see everything to now you can't really see the nuts and bolts, but trust it. And how do you trust that? So
I mean, it's interesting. Like even the demo that Sam Altman gave, the like GPT created in his video demo, which you can Google that, check it out. But he created one that basically he said, I'm often, used to be at Y Combinator, so I'm often getting questions from founders about, business strategy, blah, 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 blah,
Hmm.
blah. And like in a few minutes, he programmed the GPT. He uploaded, I think, a few of his talks, which you
Hmm.
can also do. It's not just trained on the web. You can upload files
Yep.
with data and content. And so he uploaded some of his talks and basically created a GPT to be him giving advice to founders. And I'm just like, that's interesting. But again, like getting into this wild west of
Yeah.
like IP and legal, like who's to say, Q does that and creates
Yeah.
a Sam Altman, GPT.
Yeah.
And, now it's like, well, wait a minute, like you're creating one that's trained on my work and my IP and ideas. And like, how, like,
It's crazy. And
is
then,
it, is it unethical? Like, I don't know.
no,
Like, I think
no.
like, yeah,
That's, I mean, you mentioned that you can use voice to create GPTs that haven't explored yet, but imagine if your GPT can respond in voices as well. Like my Alexa can talk in 5 different voices if I tell it,
yeah.
like depending on who it is. So the boundaries are pretty crazy. Like imagine conversing with the bot via voice both ways. Like I don't see why that's not in the near future.
Yeah.
I
I
don't
mean, so I'm gonna take that a step further. Imagine you're in a
gonna
meeting
come scratch your back.
and,
I'm just kidding.
well, no, like let's just say like you're in a Zoom meeting, right?
Yeah.
And you've invited your custom GPT co-pilot
Yep.
to join the meeting, who's listening, and maybe they're programmed to only respond when you ask questions,
Right.
but maybe it might be somebody who say like, oh, maybe we should enter this market in Indonesia, and
Yep.
you could say like, hey GPT, like how many PhDs are there in Indonesia?
Yeah.
And like instantly, boom, hey, there
There's a
are
market.
XX.
Yeah.
Like that sounds like science fiction. It's not
It's
like
not.
that. I mean, I think we'll see that capability in 2024.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's obviously time will tell, but where this goes in 3 years, 1 year, 5 years, in terms of the function of HR, the workforce models, right? Like I think in I'm convinced that we will be able to do more with less. But what does
Oh,
that
for
really
sure.
mean, right? Like when the calculator came out, folks were doing, adding and subtracting manually. So they saved time with the calculator, but that doesn't mean they didn't have something else to do. We as humans figured out what was the next thing to do and how do we advance it. So this is just at pretty quick speed, and as you can tell, for both of us, super exciting, and just feels like something I was waiting for, but I didn't know it was coming.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think for, on my end, like the parting thought, especially for all of you that are, watching or listening in the field of HR, like there's a lot of things that we do that, we as, roles across the board are not going to just be replaced by
Yep.
generative AI.
Yep.
Functions of our roles will.
Yep.
And again, I think it was Professor Scott Galloway said, um, generative AI isn't going to take your jobs. Humans using generative AI will. And I
Yep.
think, my kind of call to action for all of you out there is like, if you're not technically inclined, all of this may be scary. It's moving at lightning speed, even for people like us who
Yep.
are technologists. So we do pay attention to this stuff.
Yep.
But I implore you, make time, take like an hour out of your schedule a week
Yep.
and read articles, tinker with these tools. These are the future. They're not going away. And the sooner you learn how to begin to understand and deploy and use these, the more secure in your career you'll be, but also the more capable you'll be when you'll be able to, leverage tools like this to impact your own, impact and role. So Q, take us home, man. Final
Yeah.
thoughts.
Final thoughts, like don't be afraid, dive in, reach out to a community, either any community, any friend that you know, or just go and look for it and start typing something and you will be amazed. So don't be afraid, dive in. And remember, as people professionals, you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for the impact that you can drive, which is multiplied in any organization you are. So it's to help you, but to help the entire organization that you're supporting as well. So it's amplified. So don't be scared, jump in, and you will be fine.
Dropping it, you slipping it in the amplifier there. I like that. I like that. It was, the
Oh,
subtle, but I appreciate it.
man,
All
one
right,
month is all
everyone.
over. Thanks for calming me down. Thanks for
It's
getting
not
me
lack of
back.
sleep, brother, but I'll take it. It worked out in my favor this time.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for joining us. Hopefully next time we'll be back. We'll be back with our pal AJ.
Yep.
But we'll be back on this topic because again, we're week one of
Yeah.
these things being public. So we'll check back on this. I think we'll reconvene at some point in Q1 to see where we are and what we've built.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we're out. Thanks so much
Jump
for
in.
tuning in.
Thanks.